Would it surprise you to know that in the US at least, solving murder cases is at an all-time low? According to the FBI's website, only 50% of murders will ever be solved as of 2020. And that puts America last among developed nations for solving murder. Now, if we're talking about a cold case, that number drops to less than 30% chance it will ever be solved. And that's what makes this story really exciting. As recently as 2018, a top cold case found on lists such as Business Insider's top serial killers who were never caught, the Gilgo Beach murders or the Long Island Killer had never been found. He was believed to be responsible for up to 16 murders over 20 years, mostly of young sex workers. And after each murder, the bodies would be tossed alongside the Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach, Oak Beach, and Jones Beach State Park. What's scarier than knowing a serial killer lives nearby and nobody can stop him? They might be your neighbor. There's nothing more terrifying than knowing that a rampant serial killer has been committing numerous murders without being caught and without any leads. And it wasn't even that he hadn't been caught. There was no suspects. There was only an initial profile. White male, aged 20 to 40, access to burlap sacks, may have law enforcement knowledge, may have ties to law enforcement. That's a lot of bodies and no leads. And then July 23rd, 2023 at 8:30 p.m. outside of the New York City firm RH Consultants and Associates that he co-founded, 59-year-old Rex Heuermann was arrested as the Gilgo Beach killer, 13 years after the first body was found on Gilgo Beach. 13 years after the first girl went missing. Well, the first girl they knew of. The following was a broadcast July 14th, the day following his arrest.
Exclusive video that you'll only see here on News 4. Police say you are watching the moment before Heuermann was taken into custody last night outside of his office in Manhattan. News 4's Mark Santilla is live in Midtown to walk us through how that arrest went down. Mark?
Gilman, it was around 8:30 last night. Heuermann stepped out of his office here and walked south down 5th. He had no idea he was being followed by police. Well past the afternoon rush, as the sun set over Midtown, Rex Heuermann calmly strolled by New Yorkers here on 5th Avenue and 36th with a work bag over his left shoulder. Heuermann had no clue he was being followed by police detectives who were about to arrest the person wanted in the infamous Gilgo Beach murders, a decade-long mystery causing pain for several local families.
Rex Heuermann was born in 1964 and raised in Massapequa Park, Long Island, where he still lived at the time of his arrest. It was a community known for relatively quiet and affluent neighborhoods. Rex Heuermann, an architect, founded RH Consultants and Associates, which is a Manhattan-based architectural firm specializing in various types of design and consulting. Rex was known as a family man, happily married for 27 years with 2 grown children, though he was considered a little bit odd by his neighbors. A true crime worst nightmare. Your sweet woodworking father of 2 neighbor has killed as many as 16 women. We're headed to Long Island, New York, to the most recent serial killer cold case solved in the U.S. How the hunt for one girl unearthed a serial killer and how that killer, years into his spree, was caught in large part because of DNA on a pizza crust. Modern murderous history on today's Highway to Hell. So if you're not familiar with New York, you may not have heard this news. It did get some play nationally. It's a big story. But even I, living in New York, during the time a lot of this investigation was happening, don't really remember hearing much about it. And this arrest, his arrest, happened in July of last year. So we're not even at a year yet. This is such a riveting tale of how all of this absolutely terrifying stuff happened so recently. I don't know about you, but like when people talk about serial killers, I immediately go to like Ted Bundy. I go to the 70s and 80s when people were hitchhiking and it was so much easier to not get caught, not the modern era. I'll try to keep things as clear as I can, but I had to run in circles a little bit because of how confusing this gets. There's a ton of bodies, a ton of years people went missing. Some people weren't identified until 20 years after they went missing. I'm going to try to keep things as straightforward as I can. And of course, as always, because I have not asked for this in a few episodes, please like and share the podcast. Please put it on your Instagram story, your Facebook feed, text it to friends who love true crime. This word of mouth helps me more than anything I can possibly do online or promoting it myself, and it's deeply appreciated. And so I've talked about living in New York City. We're going to go back to part of our story takes place in New York, but we're going to focus the travel portion on Long Island. And these bodies were being found shortly before I moved to New York, but the investigation was ongoing while I lived there. And it made me think about the fact that these people, this particular type of person, could be anywhere at any time. You could be waiting in a line behind a killer or riding the train with them. And I know sometimes for me, again, I assume that the serial killer age is in the past, but that's just not the case. And if people don't know a body exists, they can't investigate it. And after researching this, I truly believe that Rex Heuermann is going to become our generation's BTK. Today, I'm going to focus heavily on the timeline of the discovery of the bodies, the police investigation since the first missing girl in 2007, and how police finally caught one of the most recent prolific serial killers. But let's start. We're going to start with how this case first broke in 2010. Josh Einiger, a New York City native, was hired by ABC's Channel 7 to report on the Long Island region of New York, a region he had never really been to, despite the fact that he was raised in New York. Part of his region was called the Ocean Parkway. Now, this is an isolated, quiet, 15-mile stretch of desolate highway between these small villages and beaches. Long Island and the Hamptons, for instance, are really just a series of small villages. It's desolate, it's a surfer's paradise in the summer, and it's very isolated out of season. On December 13th, 2010, Josh and his team were in Suffolk County doing a routine day, talking to residents about whatever bullshit, recording monotonous news, when a call comes from the news desk. A body had been found off of Ocean Parkway. Upon arriving, they discover not one crime scene, but 4. ABC cut the end of the 5 o'clock news with a breaking report.
And Liz, this is the barrier island to the south of the town of Babylon, an extensive search that goes on for a good mile along the bay here south of the town of Babylon. You could see crime scene investigators there, and then, Tony, if you want to come back out, you could see behind me, and then clear up the beach right here. There are multiple outposts here where they're right now sifting through the sand and looking for human remains. We know right now that they can confirm in the last couple of days they have found 2 bodies. We believe skeletal remains, one on Saturday, one today, and we're told possibly more remains, the remains of more bodies on the beach. We'll continue to follow this throughout the night. A full report on Eyewitness News tonight at 11. But for now, we're live on Gilgo Beach. Josh Einiger, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
2010, digging up bodies on the beach. And this is actually not far from where some of my personal training clients live. We talk about this all the time. Why were police out there, though? Why were they searching? How did this all start? How did these bodies get found? They were looking for Shannon Gilbert. Shannon Gilbert was a 24-year-old sex worker who went missing on May 1st of 2010. Born and raised in Jersey City, New Jersey, Shannon's case became central to the Gilgo Beach murders, also known as the Long Island serial killer case. She was working as an escort. She had gone to meet a client, Joseph Brewer, in Oak Beach on the night of her disappearance. At 4:51 a.m. from the Brewer's house, she made a frantic 23-minute 911 call stating that they were trying to kill her and fled Brewer's house. She was knocking on neighbors' doors for help. The neighbor, Gus Coletti, called 911 at 5:22 a.m. During the call, you can initially hear the voice of Brewer and of her bodyguard, Michael Pack. You can hear her running. She's panting. You hear the voice of Gus Coletti. She takes off. She's running. She's panting, clearly terrified for her life. But the police hadn't been able to identify where she had gone. They didn't know where she was, and they'd largely done nothing after she was reported missing. And for 6 months, the case had sat in the missing persons department with no real leads. On December 11th, 2010, during a training exercise near where Shannon was last known to have been, Suffolk County Police Officer John Malia discovered the first set of human remains. He was on a routine training exercise with a canine dog. The body was found in a burlap sack along Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach. Police investigators went back to the area she was last known to be, this time with a cadaver dog. 2 days later, police returned and found 3 more bodies dumped in the dense brush off the highway. They were later identified as Melissa Bartolome, 22-year-old Megan Waterman, missing from June 2010, and Amber Lynn Costello and Maureen Brainard-Barnes. Their remains were all wrapped in burlap sacks. All the women were sex workers who advertised on Craigslist who had disappeared within the last 4 years. Police concluded that the women were killed in separate locations and then dumped on the parkway. Shockingly, Shannon Gilbert was not found, and she was not identified as one of the bodies. So they keep searching for her. They keep digging. There's this pursuit. Where is she? And on March 29th, 2011, they find a 5th body that is also not Shannon Gilbert. And here is where the timeline is going to get confusing and funky. So buckle up, kids. I'm going to do my sponsor break way early, because if I break up the dates that are coming up, you're going to get confused, just like I got confused and had to reread my script 17,000 times. So this episode is brought to you by Intravenous Solutions, Nashville's premier IV therapy and wellness center. IV therapy can help you recover quicker from heavy workouts or illness, treat the symptoms of dehydration, and improve sleep and give you healthy, glowing skin. Being on stage several times a week, I can say that IV treatments keep me on my feet and are a lifesaver. Dr. Allen and his staff are so kind and so knowledgeable, and they make sure that every appointment is welcoming and easy. They also offer vitamin shots, oxygen therapy, Botox, filler, weight management, and mobile services. There's 4 locations in Nashville, so please come down, party with us, come check out the band, come say hi, and then beat the hangover at Intravenous Solutions. Use the code Monty10 at checkout for a 10% discount on services. All right, back to the beach and the bodies. So now they've found victim number 5. So this is Jane Doe number 5 at the time. They find a body close to her that becomes Jane Doe number 6. And these bodies provided a shocking truth, that these murders had been going on for a long time. These bodies, unlike the first 4, were also discovered as only partial remains. Only their head and their hands were found. Let's talk about Jane Doe number 5. In 2003, Jessica Taylor, 20, vanished on July 20th, 2003, while working as an escort in Manhattan. When she didn't attend a planned family get-together, her mother reported her missing. On July 26th, a woman walking her dog discovered the partial remains of a body in Manorville, about an hour's drive from Gilgo Beach, but her head and her hands were missing. The head and the hands found on March 29th as Jane Doe number 5 were the missing parts of the body, less than a mile from where the Gilgo 4 had been found. Taylor had been decapitated, and someone had tried to mutilate one of her tattoos. Investigators alleged that the perpetrator was trying to conceal her identity in the event of facial recognition, fingerprints, or tattoo identification. A golden piece of evidence that was found in 2003, though, a male human hair was recovered on Taylor. On a surgical sheet her torso had been laying on. At the time, in 2003, all the investigators knew is that it belonged to a white man. It was not able to be tested at that time. Technology hadn't caught up enough. Let's talk about Jane Doe number 6. Also discovered March 29th, 2011. Again, only her head and her hands. In September of 2000, 3 years prior to Jessica Taylor's remains being found, a different set of remains had been found in that same wooded area of Manorville, again, just missing the head and the hands. It wasn't until May of 2020 that forensic genealogy was used that these sets of remains were able to be identified as Valerie Mack. The FBI was able to use a DNA database similar to 23andMe to trace her relatives and confirm her ID. Valerie Mack was 24 years old, living in Philadelphia when she went missing. Like most of the victims in the Gilgo Beach investigation, she worked as an escort using the alias Melissa Taylor. Relatives last reported seeing Mack in the spring or summer of 2000 in Port Republic, New Jersey, but she was never reported as missing to the police. So, We now know, thanks to bodies number 5 and 6, that these murders have been going on at least since the year 2000. So it's already been at least a decade. Near the body of Valerie Mack, 2 more sets of remains were found on April 4th, 2011. An unidentified Asian male and a toddler. The child was found wrapped in a blanket and was between the ages of 18 and 24 months old when she died. Investigators say they are unsure if she was murdered. And listen, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but finding a toddler's body in a remote burial ground doesn't really scream natural death to me. Just my brain talking out loud. They had no leads as to who the toddler might be, and there was no evidence of sexual assault, thank God. They believe that the man was in his late teens or early 20s when he died, and although the cause of death was not revealed, police say it does seem that he died violently, though differently from the other bodies, and it was noted that he was dressed in women's clothing. He has still never been identified. 1 week later, on April 11th, another partial set of remains are found, almost identical to that of Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, again, part of a body. Law enforcement had expanded their search to Nassau County, about 5 miles from the original Gilgo 4. On June 28, 1997, partial remains of an African-American woman had been found in a plastic tub in Hempstead Lake State Park in West Hempstead, New York. While a Jane Doe, she was nicknamed Peaches because of a heart-shaped peach tattoo she had with a bite taken out of it on her left breast. While Peaches has never been identified, law enforcement and forensic scientists discovered 2 shocking truths. The partial remains on Gilgo Beach matched the remains found in the tub in 1997. These remains were the genetic mother of the toddler that was found on the beach. So it was Peaches and her daughter who likely died the same day in 1997. It was in Nassau County that the 10th victim was discovered, and she was labeled as Jane Doe number 7 at the time of discovery. It was discovered that she matched another cold case of an unidentified body that had been known as the Fire Island Jane Doe. A pair of legs had been found in a plastic bag on April 20th of 1996 on Fire Island's Blue Point Beach, but it wasn't until August of 2023 she was identified as the partial remains of Karen Vergata. Karen Vergata's last known communication was on February 14th, 1996, when she called home to wish her father a happy birthday. The crimes now span from at least 1996 to 2010. So let's summarize this a little bit. From December of 2010 to April 2011, 10 sets of human remains found along a stretch of several miles of Ocean Parkway in both Suffolk and Nassau counties in Long Island, New York. These remains belonged to multiple women, many of whom were sex workers. They were varying levels of disposal and death, some of them being the remaining body pieces that were found between 1996 and 2003. Police now knew several things. That many of these bodies were the dismembered remains of women who had been discovered years earlier. As of April 2011, they believed that they had 1 to 3 killers all operating in Long Island, and that it was most likely someone who lives in and was familiar with the area to know what would be deserted when. Despite finding 10 bodies, they had still not found Shannan Gilbert or her body. Oh, but there's more. Almost a year to the day. So much of this story happens between, the major points between December 9th and December 12th. Almost to the day of when this all started, of when they discovered that first body. Almost a year to the day, Long Island realized they might have a serial killer. Well, no shit. They found Shannan. Gilbert's skeletal remains are discovered in a tidal marsh near Oak Beach. After an autopsy and further investigation, Suffolk police say she most likely died accidentally. Shockingly, she doesn't seem to be tied to the other bodies that she inadvertently helped discover. It is believed that while we don't know why she was so distraught on that 911 call, that she ran blindly and panicked in the marsh, got lost, stuck in the mud and the water, and drowned. Her family does still suspect that she was murdered, and I don't blame them. There was damage to her neck, which could be indicative of strangulation. She was, either partially clothed or nude. It's a little bit unclear from sources. But her toxicology was clean. She was a known drug user, but based on what they were able to test, there was no drugs found. But they don't know. It does seem to be accidental and seems to have no ties to the other body. However, she is the reason we found any of them in the first place. And even more tragically, shortly after the discovery of Shannon's body, her mother, Mary Gilbert, who had become a crusader to find the body of her daughter, to find her daughter's killer, was stabbed to death by her other daughter, Sarah. Sarah Gilbert, a diagnosed schizophrenic, called her mother over claiming she was in distress and hearing voices, and when her mother arrived, she stabbed her 7 times until she died. In November of 2011, in an exclusive interview with then Police Commissioner Richard Dormer, the police updated their theory that they did not think Shannon Gilbert was connected to the Gilgo murders and that they thought all of the Gilgo bodies were one prolific serial killer who lived in their community. Okay. We've covered the breaking of the case, the discovery of the bodies. Let's talk about the investigation. What was wrong? What went right? And ultimately, how they caught the son of a bitch. So the Suffolk County Police Department is a small town police department not accustomed to cases of this magnitude. Again, Long Island is a series of small villages. Seriously, village is the appropriate term. Tiny towns, not much going on. When we talk about the travel portion, Long Island is not this big, exciting, happening place. Cool house parties. Don't ask me how I know. But not like city life, big venues, big environment. It's not that. The police county was not equipped to handle a case of this magnitude. They did not have the experience. Crime scene work was often incomplete. The department was disorganized. There was so much conflicting information handed to the press because the police department didn't have enough training to know, let's not talk to the press until we have more information. So the news comes out and the families of the victims are getting confused because conflicting information's coming out. This is perceived reasonably so to be ineptitude on the part of the police department. And then there's questions of why haven't you solved this crime? There's all these discoveries. There's no leads. And then it goes silent. No leads, no information. Why wasn't the FBI called in? They have better training. They were offering, right? Because the FBI has to be requested unless it crosses state lines. But Suffolk County refused their help until December 10th, again, December 9th to 12th, all these dates. December 10th, 2015, 5 years to the day. I lied. 4 years to the day, finding Shannon Gilbert's body. Here's why there was a delay in involving the FBI. Politics. Because of course, why would we prioritize solving the crime? Particularly the interest of the then police chief, James Burke, who single-handedly kept the FBI out of this investigation. Josh Einiger, remember the reporter who broke the story, had an exclusive interview with Burke in 2012 after he was just promoted to chief of department and asked him, why is this case so dysfunctional? Why isn't this moving forward? Burke said they were going to focus on the case and they were going to solve it. But as it turns out, Burke wanted to keep the FBI out because the FBI were investigating him. Burke is unfortunately one of those dirty cops that makes a lot of people distrustful of police as an entire entity. He is one of those guys. His effort while in leadership was to cover up his own misdeeds. The FBI opened an investigation on Burke in 2013 when Burke was accused of beating a handcuffed suspect, Christopher Loeb. And he made every effort to cover this up. Loeb had been arrested for allegedly breaking into Burke's unlocked vehicle, stealing a gun belt, ammunition, a box of cigars, and a bag of sex toys and pornography that Burke just happened to have in his car. In his patrol car. Not his personal vehicle, his police car. He brutally beat a handcuffed Loeb in front of 3 other officers, then mentioned giving Loeb, who was a heroin addict, a hot shot, which is a mix of heroin and other substances that very often causes lethal overdose. James Burke and the Suffolk County District Attorney, Thomas Spoda, had a decade-long friendship and collaboration. Spota was part of Burke's elaborate plot to cover up the attack on Loeb. Burke was eventually sentenced to 46 months in federal prison for assault and obstruction of justice. Obstruction of justice. There it is. Spota was found guilty. So Spota's the district attorney. He's found guilty of federal obstruction charges. He was fined $100,000 and put in jail for 5 years. So that's why the FBI wasn't called in. So James Burke gets arrested. Also, fun fact on Burke. So he gets out of jail, and then he's arrested again in 2023 for public lewdness, offering a sex act, unlawful solicitation, and exposing himself to a male plainclothes park ranger in the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Park. He literally whipped his wee-wee out in front of a park ranger at a Veterans Memorial Park and propositioned him. So it's not shocking that during his tenure, the Gilgo murders weren't maybe his priority. It wasn't until January of 2020 that any new evidence emerged. The police commissioner at the time, Geraldine Hart, released a photo of a belt. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to post a picture of the belt here. So you can see here, it's a leather belt, and it's embossed with initials that are WH or HM. They weren't sure which way it was meant to be read. But they also launched a website committed just to Gilgo information and finally started using FBI crime labs to find DNA. Technology had advanced a lot between 2003 and 2020. You can test for a lot more. Unfortunately, the belt didn't lead to any leads, and there was nothing until May of 2020. In the heat of COVID, Commissioner Hart announced that Jane Doe number 6, who we talked about earlier, so she was one of the ones that was found dismembered, was identified as Valerie Mack. She was the one that they used the DNA databases to find family, collected DNA from the family, and were able to match her to it. The Gilgo investigation was about to get another boost. Rodney Harrison was a rising superstar in the NYPD. The NYPD is the largest and arguably most professional police force in the world. And Harrison had been the chief of detectives, chief of patrol, chief of department, and then he became the police commissioner in Suffolk County. Reporters who worked for several different news stations who covered the case said they breathed a sigh of relief knowing the case would finally be properly investigated under his leadership. His appointment happened December 14th, 2021, again, almost exactly to the day 10 years after Shannon Gilbert's body was found, and he became the first black commissioner in Suffolk County history. And this man is a badass, and he does solve the crime. He solves the case. Harrison's first move was to form a task force. Again, why had that not been done? His task force consisted of FBI agents, New York State Police, Suffolk County Police, the Sheriff's Department, and the DA's office. Big dogs who know how to investigate big cases. 2 months later, the police released on April 12, 2022, video of Megan Waterman leaving a hotel the last time she was seen. They also finally release Shannon Gilbert's unedited 23-minute 911 call. This was a call that the Gilbert family attorney had been fighting for years for them to release, hoping someone could identify something. We're going to listen to part of that call here in a second, but the police also at this time released a formal statement that they believed that Shannon's tragic death was an accident. It seems that she was distressed and again ran blindly into a boggy, wet, tons of mud, deep brush marsh. She got stuck and she drowned. And this clip is a little bit on the longer side that I would normally include, but this phone call gives such important context for what happened that night, why police think what they do. And so, so the video is about 3 minutes long. And the first male voice you hear is Joseph Brewer. He was the client. The second male voice you hear is Michael Pack. He was her security guard that she would travel with for her safety. He would literally sit in the car outside the house while she went in and they did their business. And then he was there for her safety. So that's important to note.
State Police, Trooper Fry. State Police.
Yeah, there's somebody after me.
I'm sorry?
There's somebody after me.
Where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Okay, where are you?
There's somebody after me.
Where are you, ma'am?
I don't know.
You're driving right now?
No, I'm inside the house.
I'm sorry?
I'm inside the house.
What house?
I don't know. Can you trace where I am?
I'm sorry?
Can you trace where I am?
No, I can't. What's your callback number you're calling from?
Huh?
What phone number are you calling from?
Somebody's after me. Please.
Are you in Suffolk County or Nassau County?
I'm in Long Island.
Where on Long Island are you?
No. 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 No, stop, no.
Where in Long Island are you? In Suffolk County? Nassau County?
Huh? All right. Why you call me by my name? Why?
County, you on the line?
Stop. Please. Stop it, please. Please stop. Please, can you shut the door?
No, time to go.
Please. Please. Please.
Go that way, please. Come on, let's go. Come on, roll that side. Come on, go outside. Come on, all of us. Come on, go outside. Come on.
No, please.
Come on. Come on. Please, come on.
Please.
Come on.
Why?
Just come out here. Come on, I'll go upstairs. You leave. I'm going to sit upstairs. I'm going to go upstairs. You leave. I'm going to go upstairs. Okay? You leave, please. Please, get your ticket. My hold. What's the matter? Are you okay?
What are you going to do? What are you going to do to me?
She's in my house on my phone.
Why?
Huh? Well, I don't know, but it was transferred to me.
Why?
No.
Are you going to tell me?
So the call starts when she's in the house, still with Brewer. He goes and gets Michael, says, hey, you need to take care of her. She doesn't seem to recognize Michael. She's panicking towards the end of the call. You can hear her asking him, what are you going to do to me? Are you going to kill me? And he's like, are you crazy? He seems genuinely concerned for her welfare, genuinely confused about what's going on. And then according to what we know about the situation, because the task force ruled out Brewer and Peck for harming her, she takes off. She goes to a neighbor. The neighbor calls the police. She runs from the neighbor. The neighbor tries to get her to stay put while he calls the police. She runs. And it was the neighbor's house was the reason they were able to identify where she was located. And she's on this call for 23 minutes. There's these long periods of silence. The dispatch will be on the phone saying, hey, are you there? Hello? And then she'll be like, huh? How do you know my name? Or what do you mean there's someone? And she just keeps saying there's someone after me. There's someone after me. You hear her running. You hear her racing across the pavement. At a certain point, you don't hear any other voices in the recording. So I have no idea what happened. But it seems to me, especially with her not recognizing her bodyguard, it seems like she might have had a psychotic break. I don't know. But this call is a large part of the reason that they believe that she wasn't part of the Gilgo murders. It really, truly seems to be an accident. But they did release the call hoping that it would trigger something. Interest in the case, leads, people calling in, anything to continue to get all of this rolling. So here's the thing. Let's go back to Rex Heuermann. How did he become a suspect? Well, I read through the 32-page original indictment, and a witness to the disappearance of Amber Costello, one of the original four, identified a first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche as the vehicle believed to be driven by her killer. It was there one day. A witness also saw him, but then that vehicle was back, the same truck, the day she disappeared. So after searching for that specific vehicle against registration records, it was discovered on March 14th, 2022, that a first-generation Avalanche belonged to Heuermann at the time of the murders. It was also witnessed to be dark in color, which his was. There wasn't a whole bunch of this truck on Long Island, so he became a suspect. With that evidence, they were able to get 300 subpoenas and warrants, and that's when they started finding a lot more implicating evidence. For instance, cell phone billing records for Heuermann corresponded to the cell site locations for the burner cell phones used to contact the sex workers, 3 out of the 4 victims. He had a burner and he also had his actual phone with him. So what that means is they were able to trace calls that came from these burner phones. And then they were able to go to his actual cell phone and be like, well, where were you? He was in the same location. There were taunting calls made to the relatives of Miss Bartholomew and a call made by a detective to Miss Bartholomew's cell phone while looking for her disappearance. There were calls checking her phone. All of these happened in the area he was always in. Either his cell phone was located near that area, or all of those calls came to or from his house or right next to where he worked. All the same cell towers. The last known cell phone activity of the victims all tracked between towers in the area of Manhattan where his office was and his home in Massapequa Park. The witness who had seen the client that Amber Costello had a altercation with described him as a white male, 6'4" to 6'6", mid-40s, dark bushy hair, big oval style 1970s type eyeglasses, and the witness also identified that dark first-generation Chevrolet Avalanche parked in the driveway. See, Amber had pulled a fast one on him. He came to her house. Obviously, services were going to be exchanged. She had a friend barge in pretending to be her outraged boyfriend. She pocketed his money while he was thrown out of the house. He comes back the day she disappears. She's never seen again, but that truck was seen that day. The next evidence they accessed was travel records, and they noticed that Rex's wife and children were out of town on significant trips during every disappearance. Specifically, the disappearances are Bartholomew, Waterman, and Costello. Travel records showed that on July 8th, 2009, Heuermann's wife was in Iceland. She didn't come back till the 18th. This corresponds with Melissa Bartholomew's disappearance. June 4th, 2010 to June 8th, 2010, she was in Maryland. This lines up with Megan Waterman's disappearance, and she was in New Jersey during the dates that Amber Costello disappeared. So that means he would have the house all to himself to do whatever he wanted to do with his family out of town. Again, using cell phone records and billing records, also credit card charges, police were able to prove he was in the general area of every single one of the burner calls that were initiated, all of the calls and activity that came from Melissa Bartholomew's cell phone after her death, and it was the same area that the phone calls originated from that called taunting her family. Again, all of those burner calls were never far from his house or his office. And I find this so fascinating. I got all of this information directly from the indictment, from what the prosecuting attorney submitted to the judge. It's amazing how they just use technology to just pin his ass to the wall. One of the things, again, that this prick did was he taunted the family of Melissa Bartholomew. He called her sister and would say, you know what happened to her, you know what I did to her, and he'd hang up. And this, I'm going to read this directly from the indictment. On July 23, 2009, at approximately 6:42 p.m., a male caller used the Bartholomew phone to contact her family. The Bartholomew phone was located in New York City at this time, specifically attached to a cellular tower located 275 West 39th Street, which is 872 feet from Heuermann's then office space. On July 23, 2009, between approximately 8:29 p.m. and 9:30 p.m., the burner cell phone still had activity in New York City. On August 5th, 2009, between approximately 6:50 p.m. and 7:11 p.m., a male caller used the Bartholomew phone to contact Miss Bartholomew's family. During said time period, the Bartholomew phone utilized the following cell tower in New York City, which was 2,200 feet from Heuermann's then office space. On this same date, during a similar time frame between 6:46 and 7:05 p.m., Heuermann's cell phone listed billing locations in New York City, also 2,200 feet from his then office space. They were able to prove that 4 times. 4 times that this call goes to her family. His phone is operating in the exact same area. Different calls from victims' phones. He was there every time. Interesting. Like they literally had maps of this showing where each dot was and where his office was. And then after accessing his Tinder account, fictitious name, of course, they identified several burner phone numbers and emails, all used to contact sex workers for illicit activities. They could also prove that he used his personal phone to access these burner emails. So he couldn't claim they weren't his. It's on your actual phone. Stupid. And that multiple burner phones used to contact the victims were traced near his office and home. Gets so much worse. Once they serve warrants to Google, Google finds a junk email named Thok080672. Don't know what that date is for. It's referred to as Thok email from that point forward in the indictment, and it was under the fictitious name of Thomas Hawk. The search warrant revealed that this email account was associated with a burner cell phone that they knew was linked to the deaths of one of these girls. That this cell phone was used to conduct thousands of searches related to sex workers, sadistic torture-related pornography, and child pornography, including, number 1, top search, Mistress Long Island. Number 2, mature escorts, Manhattan. Number 3, girl begging for rape porn. 4, teen girl begging for rape porn. 5, pretty girl with bruised face porn. 6, torture redhead porn. And I'm going to stop there. But I will say that many of these searches, as he goes, because the list of searches is long, the descriptions match exactly the appearance of his victims that he killed, including there was one that was twink Asian man porn. And then they find an Asian man in woman's clothing dead on the beach. Interesting. Again, most of these searches, torturous, sadistic, child and teen porn related. He was a sick fuck. The same email, same burner number, used to conduct over 200 searches between March of 2022 and June of 2023 related to the active and known serial killers, the specific disappearances and murders of the Gilgo 4, and the investigation into their murder. Searches such as, why could law enforcement not trace calls made by the Long Island serial killer? Looking up Long Island serial killer update. FBI active serial killers. Terrifying active serial killers. Megan Waterman. Melissa Bartolome. Maureen Brainard-Barnes. Mapping Long Island murder victims. The Gilgo Beach Killer, Criminal Minds. In Long Island serial killer investigation, new phone technology may be the key to break the case. He was very interested in knowing what the police knew about him. The email and phone also searched for a number of podcasts. Rex, if you ever hear this disrespectfully, fuck you. He searched for podcasts, documents regarding the investigation, as well as repeatedly viewing hundreds of images depicting the murdered victims and members of their immediate families. He was looking at the victims' pictures. He was stalking their families. He also searched for and viewed articles concerning the task force. He wanted to know who was on it, what agencies they were from, the same task force that was investigating him. Law enforcement found selfies sent through these fictitious accounts, proving that he was the one who owned them. They were pictures of him, from his phone to these accounts, from one account to the next account. He was also caught on surveillance in a store buying more minutes for one of his burner phones. Not smart. They were able to prove these suspicious searches, and cell phone uses were also linked to his home IP address. Again, why would you use your home computer? Come on, man. Okay, I need to get a drink. This is so damn good. I swear, I just... researching this case, I'm like, I could be a criminal journalist or an FBI agent. This is where it cranks up. And thank God for public records, because you know where to look. And let's go back to the original Gilgo 4. Some things I said earlier are going to all tie in such a beautiful... It's like a movie. I feel like I'm reading you a movie, and this happened within the past couple years. Okay, so the Gilgo 4. Maureen Brainard-Barnes had been left restrained with 3 leather belts, one of which was utilized to tie Barnes' feet and ankles together. During the examination of the belts, a female human hair was recovered from the buckle that did not match her. It wasn't her hair. It was a female hair, but not hers. They couldn't test it at the time. Megan Waterman had been bound by clear or white duct tape. Examining her body, they found 2 female human hairs that were not hers. And they could only identify that it was Caucasian or European hair, but could not test it further at that time. So we have 1 hair on Maureen, 2 hairs on Megan. Amber Costello had been found with 3 pieces of clear white duct tape. A female human hair was recovered on a piece of tape inside the burlap sack. They realized it was Caucasian or European. They couldn't test it further. And I know you're thinking like, female hair, what does that have to do with? The lab was able to determine that, number 1, all of the female hairs belonged to none of the victims. Then law enforcement sneakity sneaks over to the driveway when Heuermann had taken the trash out. They steal the trash. They DNA tested. At this time, only Rex and his wife lived there. Their children were adults. The lab determined that the hair matched the DNA of the female living in the home. It was his wife's hair. But here's the thing. So they've proven that the wife was gone during all of these murders. So that means those bodies had to be in their house, or it transferred off of Rex's person onto them. So, and something interesting about the way that they phrase DNA testing, which I didn't know, is when they do testing, they look for exclusions. So they match it up to a percentage. So you could have a 66% match, or you could have, it rules out this percentage of people. Like it rules out 90% of people in North America. And then you can identify, does this person whose hair I have still fit in the 10% that it could be? With this particular match to his wife's hair, it ruled out 99.98% of the North American population and did not rule out her. It was her fucking hair. Also, a male hair had been found on Waterman's body. On January 26, 2023, a surveillance team, so they have this hair, they're following him, sneaky. They see that he throws a pizza box into the garbage in New York, right in front of his office, 385 Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. They secured the box, took DNA from a leftover pizza crust, and it matched. So now they have his wife's hair on 3 of the victims, his hair on 1. At the time of his arrest, Heuermann had on his person the burner cell phone that was linked to the email account researching child porn and the investigation and the girls' names and so much more that's going to come up in a second. So he was initially charged with the murders of Melissa Bartolome, Megan Waterman, and Amber Costello. On June 7th, this month, so June 7th, 2024, this month, like 20 days ago, he was charged for the murder of Jessica Taylor. Remember Jane Doe number 5? That the first part of her body was found in 2003 with a hair on her body? They matched it. And he was charged with the 1993 murder of Sandra Castilla, who had not been previously linked to the Gilgo murders. So let's start with Jessica. Let's talk about how they connected her with like evidence they can charge him with. Because it's one thing to be like, we think he killed all these people. It's another thing to be like, what can I prove beyond a reasonable doubt in court? So in the new indictment, new evidence again showed that a witness had seen a dark Chevy 10:30 p.m. July 25th, 2003, near where Jessica's remains were found the next day. So again, remember that it was a first generation Chevrolet Avalanche. The witness sees this truck July 25th, 2003. Heuermann had bought his truck in 2002. They later found an internet search that he again had searched for leads the police had on finding her body in that location. And he searched to buy a new truck, even though his was only a year old, and he tried to delete his searches. But remember, children, it stays on the internet. And I have some things that I'm very upset will be on the internet, but for the most part, I'm in the clear because I never did anything too egregious. And of course, his DNA matched the hair on her body. And again, his family was confirmed to be on a trip, this time in Vermont, and witnesses who were family friends vacationing at the same resort confirmed he was not there. Phone calls from his house to the resort in Vermont, from his office to the resort, proved he wasn't with them. For Castilla, we haven't spoken about her because she was not initially linked at all, and she was not found near the remains of those bodies, even though she was found in Suffolk County, just in a very different area. November 20th, 1993, 2 individuals, while hunting in a deeply wooded area of Southampton, so in the Hamptons, they find the remains of Sandra Castilla. Her date of birth was August 25th, 1965. She would have been 28 years old at the time. She was lying on her back with her arms outstretched over her head with her uncovered legs spread apart. The victim's shirt had been pulled up over her torso and head, exposing her breasts. The victim had numerous sharp force injuries to her face, torso, breasts, left thigh, and vaginal area. She was a Trinidad and Tobago native. She had been living in New York prior to her disappearance and death. And if these charges are true, she is his first known victim. There were 3 hairs found on Sandra. Again, this was a cold case that somebody was like, wait a minute, wasn't there this case at this time? They find this case, 3 hairs. I would imagine that someone was tasked with dig through every cold case and test his hair against all of them. They had 2 female hairs, 1 male hair. After excluding a suspect of her case originally, John Bitchrolf, he was excluded, didn't match the DNA. They compared her DNA to the Gilgo case. The male hair matched Heuermann, and the female hair matched the hair of the girlfriend he was living with 2 months before the murder. So he wasn't married at this time, but he was living with a woman up until shortly before Sandra died. Maybe the breakup was the trigger. They find this woman. She's an adult. She's married. She has a family now. She consents to a DNA test. It's her hair. She had just moved out. He has the house all to himself, and thus the beginning of the MO. They also, this was wild. They found in Heuermann's deleted files a Microsoft Word document labeled planning document, utilized to methodically blueprint and plan out his kills. And if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to throw up some pictures of the way that he had this document set up. It includes things like this. So it's broken up into 4 categories labeled problems, supplies, DS, which law enforcement said stands for dump site, and TRG, which is targets. So here's, oh my goodness, it's so crazy. I'm going to describe this to you for those of you just listening. So problems, he has listed DNA, tire marks, fingerprints, trace supplies, photos, fingerprints. Then for things under supplies, he's got acid, rope, cord, photo film, body wash, tarps, medical gloves. The DS portion of this gets very interesting. So Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor were found at 2 different dump sites. One was on Mill Road and one on Ocean Parkway. The first dump site listed on his little list here is Mill Road with question marks next to dump site number 2. And then TRG, again, appears to reference targets or victim. The first thing he has is T1 Megan Waterman. He puts underneath that small is good. All of his victims were very petite, and they think that small is good refers to having small, easy to overpower, petite, easy to move victims. They believe that this document was used around his murder of Jessica Taylor or Valerie Mack. And this next photo, these are taken directly from the indictment. So this second portion of his planning document is 3 columns. It says pre-prep, prep, and post-event. Oh my goodness. So pre-prep, vehicle inspection, weather report, recon videos, cameras, recon pickup zones for video cameras. Prep, set up stage, holding area, crossbar, hard point. I don't know what those mean. But let's look at post-event. Destroy file, change tires, burn gloves, dispose of pics, have story set. That's pretty damning pretty damning. Oh, but it gets worse. Because, again, why is this important? Why am I sharing this with you? In order to prove first-degree murder and get those big sentences, you have to prove premeditation. And that's exactly what this document does. Last part of this I'm going to show here is a list of things he put under things to remember. Sound travels. Control the amount of air in and out to control the noise made. Get sleep before hunt. Too tired creates problems. Hit harder. Too many hits to take down. Consider a hit to the face or neck next time for takedown. More sleep and noise control equals more playtime. Use push pins to hang drop cloths from ceiling, not tape. Use heavy rope for neck. Light rope broke under stress of being tightened. So a couple key words here. Hunt, right? Get sleep before hunt. Using the words next time implies that there was a this time. More playtime indicates he is keeping these women in his house to do nefarious, terrible things to them. Oh, he even has on his body prep section, which I didn't show a picture of, but on his body prep section, he has a way to prevent identification, which is what? Chopping heads and hands off like he did with Valerie Mack and Jessica Taylor. He even had several notes on criminal profiling taken directly from John Douglas's book, now Netflix series, called Mindhunter, that was originally released in 1996. If you don't know who John Douglas is, he's one of the key FBI agents that are the reason that the Behavioral Analysis Unit exists and criminal profiling exists. He seemed to be taking notes on how to torture or dump his victims in a way to mislead investigators to thinking he was a different kind of killer. Heuermann had quite a few resources and searches on serial murder. He had clearly been searching and fantasizing about this for a long time. It's hugely significant to prove first-degree murder. Holy shitballs, Batman. And here's the thing. There's no resolution to this yet. The trial hasn't even been set. Heuermann is now facing murder charges for Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, Amber Costello, Jessica Taylor, and Sandra Castilla, and is, for obvious reasons, still a prime suspect for the other killings. Jane Doe, known as Peaches, and her baby haven't been identified. The Asian male hasn't been identified. They can't prove Karen Vertega yet. Obviously, he's still a prime suspect for Maureen Brainard-Barnes, who is one of the first four found. The most recent news is his arraignment for the murders of Jessica Taylor and Sandra Castillo, which happened this month. This is real-time true crime. Because of the nature of his crimes, obviously, he has been remanded without bail. As of now, technically, he is merely accused and suspected of crimes because the trial has not started. But considering the amount of DNA evidence and the internet searches and the, hey, it just so happens you were here every time a victim's cell phone was used, it's pretty damning. How does that make you feel? Gives me the heebie-jeebies. All right, let's go to Long Island's travel section. So as I mentioned earlier, Long Island is a series of small villages. This is not a city. This is not a bustling. It's the suburbs. It's like the fancy suburbs. This is where people go to buy homes that live in New York, that they want to go to Long Island for the weekend to get away from the hustle and bustle. Like, so many of my New York clients have homes in Long Island or the Hamptons. That is what the successful in New York do. There's great restaurants, there's great beaches, there's hiking, but there's cool kind of boutique shops. But again, not bustling. These are small communities. When it's off season, it is dead out there. But there are some great places. So I'm going to focus on, same as I normally do, 3 restaurants, 3 bars, and then just kind of some unique to Long Island things. Now, to be fair with this, I have spent most of my Long Island time in the Hamptons visiting clients, and So most of my experience is there, but I've been to Montauk and a couple other places that are pretty amazing, and I'm going to talk about those as well. The first one I'm going to mention, and keep in mind, especially for my recommendations that are in the Hamptons, it is going to be balls to the walls packed in the summer. Between like end of May to mid-September, packed. But if you go during the off season, it's super peaceful. It's so nice. Because I've also gone to visit clients in the off season when they just happen to be there for whatever reason. It's great. So first place I'm going to recommend it's in Southampton. It's called Cowfish. It's just a beautiful, like, great menu, great food, great service consistently every single time. The building itself is so incredibly beautiful. It overlooks the water. It kind of looks like it's in a big kind of mansion house. And again, really, really great service all the times that I've been there. And across the street, so this kind of fits into my bar recommendations, they have like a sister bar / restaurant called Roomba, and they specialized in rum-based cocktails. This place is more lively. The drinks are amazing. Like, I'm typically a bourbon drinker, but a really nice rum cocktail is pretty bomb. I actually started my drinking life on rum. I just remembered that before I became sophisticated. But if you go to Roomba, you have to have the duck empanadas. So delicious. You know, and one of the things, as I think about my dream life, which revolves mostly around travel and food and drinks, I'm going to have to be careful, because if I keep going to places like this and my dream of getting paid to travel and do stuff like this comes true, I am going to be the size of a yacht. But as of now, I'm in the clear. Now, a type of food that I don't eat nearly often enough, but deserves recognition because Long Island has a very big Italian community. The Trattoria in St. James is, I think, the best restaurant in Long Island across the board, but especially for Italian food. The Trattoria is like, it's a very nice restaurant, but it's got much more of like a mom and pop vibe, and the food is very, very authentic. I can't wish I could remember what I had the last time I was there, but it's so good. Extensive wine list. It's wonderful. And since most of today's story took place in Suffolk County, there is a French restaurant called Les Soirs that is just impeccable. Now, this place is, again, one of those places that's going to be a little bit on the pricier side, but absolutely incredible. Again, kind of a lot of the restaurants are in these kind of cottage style settings where you're coming into a restaurant, but it kind of feels like you're walking into someone's home. And this is some of the most fresh food I've ever had. And I'm talking like perfect sauces, perfect temperature, and some of the best cocktails I've ever had. I mean, like, and these dishes come out, and I love French cuisine, but I will admit that it's something I haven't had as much. It's not as common, you know, unless you're in places like New York, to find really good restaurants, French restaurants. It was perfect. The service was perfect. The dishes are perfect. The cocktails, perfect. So if you're in the area, happen to be in Suffolk County, this is probably my top food recommendation. And talking about bars, I'm going to mention this one. Like, it is a great bar. I have no complaints because it does something unique that I kind of love. So like Long Island, again, it's a lot of families, you know, college kids come out there, and it can definitely, it's again, super busy during busy season. And it's like you walk in, and I'm in my 30s now, and it's just like, oh, I don't want to be around a bunch of 18, 20-year-olds. Like, I just don't. You are a child. Go sit in the corner. But Hoptron in Pachog does 25 plus nights, which is and I ended up coming in there on accident. I didn't know that this was a thing, but it was really nice to be in a busy happening bar with 25 plus year olds. It was just nice. So if you're there and you're like, I can't do the college crowd, but Pachog, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. I'm not sure that that's correct, but I think it is. But then this is in Suffolk County as well, where our crimes took place. But Pachog is surrounded by checkpoints, so do not drink and drive. The cops out there do not play when it comes to that. Do not do it. And you already know, because I'm a creature of habit and I obviously have impeccable taste, that I'm going to recommend a speakeasy. Because everywhere I go, everywhere I travel, I try to find a speakeasy. And the best one is Charlotte's Speakeasy. And what makes Charlotte's extra special to me as a book nerdy girl is there's a secret. So Charlotte's is a frozen yogurt and dessert shop. Okay. There is a bookcase that opens into a door and you transport back into Prohibition. And it's very meticulously decorated. It's very historically accurate. There's jazz ensembles and there's like food and drinks. And like you can get reservations for dinner. You can't get reservations for the bar, but walk-ins are welcome. Yes, secret drinking place behind a bookshelf. Victory. If you've seen the movie Gangs of New York, you'll remember that one of those important gangs that kicks off the movie is called the Dead Rabbit. And it is named after that very famous Irish gang. It is an Irish pub that is one of the most highly awarded pubs in the country. I love a speakeasy. I love a good pub. And this pub has everything. It's got the right colors, the maximalist picture decor, great bar food. There's live music. There's Irish music sometimes. 10 out of 10. Again, one of the most highly rated bars overall in Long Island, but one of the most awarded pubs in the country. And then I just wanted to talk about some things that are kind of unique to Long Island. Again, Long Island is the kind of vacation that like you're resting, you're relaxing, you're slowing down. It's not going to be a fast-paced, itinerary-packed thing. The Montauk Lighthouse is so beautiful. So Montauk is like on the edge of the Hamptons. The Hamptons aren't technically Long Island, okay? People in New York are going to get upset at me about that. But I'm grouping them because a lot of people that are traveling there just to visit are traveling to one or both at the same time. So I'm grouping them. I know they're not the same. Montauk, Lighthouse, beautiful. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. There's also a lot of wineries and orchards out in Long Island. You can take extensive wine tours that are just really beautiful. You can take bike wine tours, which I've always kind of questioned because I'm like, are we drinking after we get off the bikes? Because otherwise I feel like somebody's going to fall. But it's beautiful. Beautiful. Very much well worth it. If you're out in southern Long Island near Babylon, there's a place called Argyle Lake. Super quiet. Really nice place to just sit and read. Again, everything about Long Island is it's just slower. So it's like, imagine any small town you've ever been in, or if you're from the north and you come down to the south and you're like, why is everything moving slower? It's like that. It's just slower. The Nassau County has actually a very beautiful, it's a small but beautiful museum of art. It's in this gorgeous mansion. A lot of really unique pieces, a lot of historical pieces. There's a beautiful, tailored garden. Tailored? That's not the word I'm looking for, but it's close enough. There's like a tailored garden on the outside. It's really, just breathtaking. And again, it's not one of those museums that's like so overwhelming you can't see all of it when you go visit. So that's important to note. There's also, there's Montauk Lighthouse. There's also, it's Horton Point has a lighthouse nautical museum, which is kind of cool. It's just a unique thing that you don't get to see very often. I would imagine there are things like that in Maine, places that were, really ports, but not super active ports the way that New York was, for instance, or New Orleans. And next to Horton Point, there's this beautiful beach. Like it's truly, truly a beautiful beach. As someone who has spent time in the Caribbean and on the Mediterranean beaches, really beautiful beach. And it's so clear. You can see all the way through it. There's these big rocks you can take a seat on and just enjoy the scenery. Because, beaches up north are just rockier. It's not your smooth sand white beaches. And there's this beautiful wooden staircase that takes you down there. It's called 67 Steps Beach because there's a 67-step staircase down there. I'm trying to think, make sure I didn't miss anything. That's pretty much it. Again, you want Go to New York, and if you're like, I want to go to Long Island, it's an interesting demographic. Especially the people that are from there. But it's fun. I still do recommend it. Get out there, just, take a couple days, go relax a little bit, find a house, sit on the beach, go to these restaurants, go to some, really cool speakeasies and pubs, and don't get murdered. I will definitely be giving an update to this episode as the case unfolds, and obviously once the trial completes and we find out exactly what happens to Rex and if he's ever tied to the other murders, the other bodies. I am obsessed with this episode because I'm like, it literally is like I'm living a true crime movie right now. Last little tidbit of information that I found right at the end of researching this episode is that Rex Heuermann happened to own property in Las Vegas and South Carolina, and officers in those counties are researching cold cases that may also be connected to him. There is truly no way for us to know how many people he's potentially killed, how long he's been killing. We know it's at least since 1993. Could be much longer, could be a lot more bodies. Thank you so much for road tripping with me today. I'm so excited to see how this all plays out. And again, thank you for listening to another episode of Highway to Hell.